Hi, I'm Chris Hansen from Karate Unity. I travel, train, and teach all over the world. I cross-train with others because I believe that no style is the best, as you can always learn and improve on something. It's important to embrace similarities and learn from our differences. I also speak with amazing people to gain insight into the martial arts. Welcome to today's episode where we're honored to have a true martial arts legend, Hanshi Patrick McCarthy. With over 40 years of experience in Japanese martial arts, Hanshi McCarthy is a renowned expert in Kyusho Jitsu and founder of the IRC, International Ryukyu. He also is a former Canadian kickboxing champion and author of a collection of martial arts books. Let's dive into his incredible insights. Hey guys, welcome back to the Karate Unity channel. Our content focuses on cross-training and other arts and combat sports to make your base art better. Today, we have a special guest, former North American karate kickboxing champion, world-renowned martial artist, teacher, seminar leader, historian, and an authority in kata bunkai. May I present to you Hanshi Patrick McCarthy. Thank you for coming, sir.
Look, I'm tickled pink. Thanks so much for having me, and I'm really looking forward to having a chat with you. And for the folks who probably don't know that we've already been talking before we opened up the podcast, you and I are homies from Scarborough, right?
That's right. Everything that we were talking about before just brought us back. It's a cultural thing, you know, so it's really cool. But before we begin, I just wanted to thank Hanshi Cesar Brokowski for setting all this up. I also wanted to tell you what drew me to you was Vic Arnold. Yeah, he was one of my senseis. I trained under him for about 12 years. He passed away in 2015, which I'm sure you're aware of. And during that time, you know, he regularly quoted your work on the habitual acts of violence. And what drew me was the whole template. He would mention, quoted you, kata as a template, the template approach to karate. I was like, poof. I was going, this aligns with the way I look at karate, kind of like in a Jeet cross-training kind of method in terms of concepts. So I said, okay, I need to follow you and take a look at your work. And so this was like way back. And as mentioned earlier in our pre-talk, shout out to Michael Combs from Hudson Jindo Martial Arts. I can't remember how I came across him. I think I just reached out to him and I said, look, I'd like to try some of your Kori Uchinari study group sessions. And I think I trained with those guys for a while. And then finally, I can't remember which year. It was, I think, mid-2000s. I went to a Mississauga seminar hosted by
Sakamoto, Mike Coombs.
Yes. Yeah. And I brought one of my private students there because I wanted him to experience a seminar, practical karate seminar. And those are my connections to you. So just wanted to share that.
Well, look, Mike Coombs and Helen Sakamoto are just two extraordinarily wonderful people. And I just can't say enough nice things about the both of them. And I with that information that we spoke about last time we talked on the internet, I went through my photos trying to find of my Mississauga seminars, and I certainly found several of Vic Sensei and and I looked through there were big crowds in those days for the seminars, 2014, 15, 16, 17, like that, and I couldn't find you. But so have you changed much? You and I both have the same hairstyle, so
haven't changed much, being the same.
So I'll be looking for the guy with the bald head in the photographs, and if I find it, I'm going to send it to you. Okay?
Yeah, I'd love that.
So I have to take you back a little bit first.
Yes.
So I told you I'm originally a hair and choker. And for the folks who are listening and don't know what a hair and choker is, it's a name we folks from down east in New Brunswick call ourselves, and not to be confused, the Blue Nosers from Nova Scotia. Potato pickers from PEI, and of course the Newfs. My older brothers retired to Newfoundland. A beautiful place, by the way. Excuse me. And so I relocated from St. John, New Brunswick to Toronto in 1970. I was 15 years old. And so anyway, and I first trained with Soroka Sensei there, and And
Yes,
then I
Soroka.
got, it was a long haul to get down to the dojo in those days from Scarborough. I had to take the bus down to Warden Station from Markham and Eglinton, and then from Warden Station, I used to go down to my first stop was Bloor and Eglinton, and or was it Yonge and Eglinton? I forgot. Anyway, then I would go straight down Yonge Street on the subway to Dundas Street before I go to Spadina. I'll pass that way,
Yep.
And ultimately, I would get hooked up with the Canadian Karate Kung Fu Association.
Yep.
But in between Soroka and David Chong Sensei or Sifu, I got wrapped up with Pencak Silat people, Pukalon, Pajimi Kuntao. That's an interesting story for another time. And there was a girl involved with that one as well. And then, of course, going through Chinatown, coming from St. John, the Brunswick, the only Asian we had there was we had an absolutely stunning Chinese restaurant I think it was called the Moon Palace. And so that was my only exposure to Oriental people. So by the time I got to Toronto, it was like this remarkable mecca of from so obviously the first block from Yonge over to on Dundas Street, from Yonge over to I think it was Gerrard. Not so many Chinese people, but then this next block all the way over to Spadina is completely.
Oh, it's all Chinese. Yeah, 100%.
And so I would often be late going to the dojo because I was just so mesmerized by the smells, the sound, the language, the girls.
The chashu pork.
Oh yeah, the chashu pork. Yeah, man, chashu fan, moiga fan, and the chow lung ha, si cha pai quat,
Oh, wow. You speak Chinese? Oh,
you don't want to hear what I can say in Chinese. Oh, yeah,
I got to show this to my wife. She speaks Cantonese.
Oh my God, no! Don't show her what I just said. Erase that part out. The other part there. Oh, your wife is Chinese. Okay, yeah, beep. Yeah. Just say "Homa, hopan yo." Oh yeah,
You got the accent down, Pat. That's great.
I used to. I love imitating. I've got lots of accents. But look, you're talking about Vic. You're talking about the people that he talked about.
Yes.
And I want to go back.
Yes.
So back in that era, and I started competing in tournaments around 1972, London, Ontario, Sudbury, Sarnia, St. Kitts, Hamilton, Toronto, all those places back in the day. And of course, we go across the lake, across the border. If it was around one way to Albany or around the other way to Windsor or down Buffalo, Syracuse, Rochester, those areas down there. Yeah, I mean, there was a tournament literally or two every single weekend, and you get to know a lot of people. And of course, Bob Dalglish was one of those early guys that I got to know quite well. And certainly by extension, Chuck Merriman through him.
Yes.
Another story, a wonderful human being, by the way, and a very deeply missed person and a wonderful mentor on top of that. But Bob Dalglish, of course, and later we can talk about it in around 1977. And Bob was having some problems, some issues, and the things had fallen apart for him up in Sudbury. So he came down to Toronto. I got a knock at my door. It was him. Oh, Sensei, what are you doing here? I would need a place to stay. Yep. And he stayed with me for several weeks. And then, of course, he went out west after that. And the next thing I heard, he passed away.
Yes.
So look, we were close. I know him very well. There's an interesting story about his innovative, eclectic, and ideas for how karate should be. And I was his guinea pig at the time while he was creating his first kata, which would become known as the Wolverine.
Wolverine kata, yes.
I was the model for that kata, and anyway, that's another story. But so during that era, there was a handful of guys that we we were kind of senior guys, senior, you know, uh,
Yeah.
senior. I think had I not been, I wasn't very old, but because I started in the '60s. Even being young, by the time I got to the mid '70s, I'd already been training for a decade. And I being in Toronto and going to all the tournaments, you get a chance to meet the who's who. And of
Yeah.
course, in those days, I mean, I was extremely lucky to attract. I won a lot. You know my history. I've won a lot of tournaments, and not just in fighting, but kata and weapons as well. And I ventured out in the kung fu world very, very seriously as well. And so I made friends with Wally Slokey, and he kind of became my kumite coach. And I would go over to the Bloor Street School. Tony Facsetti was teaching over there in Indiana. Tony loved kung fu, and he loved the Tiger and Crane. I taught him the Tiger and Crane.
Yeah.
Sometimes I go down to the Dundas Street with Wally and teach down there, or up to the Brampton School. And when Wally was bringing his first flock of contact fighters together. Keep in mind that he ventured down to L.A. Oh gosh, I mean, my mind. I think his first experience was, other than being this remarkable fighter, then totally gifted alpha athlete that he was the Downsview Arena 1970 sparring match. I think that match. I think Monty Guest had something to do with helping it might have been Dominic Pinto or one of the guys from the old dojo who was supposed to spar with Joe Louis at the time. And they said, no, we're not going to spar with him. He was a Marine Corps monster.
Yeah, he's a beast.
And total beast. And Slokey said, I'll fight him. And, to get into the ring, I mean, what a set of balls.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you something. And look at that fight. I don't want to say it didn't turn out well for him because, I mean, come on. I think it was Wally was 160 pounds at the time, and Joe was 220 and change, and like 6% body fat or something. It was just remarkable. And there were a few rules. You couldn't elbow, no knees, and and Wally kicked Joe in the face, boom, and then I think Joe got a little angry about that. And I think the video's still online. Even when he grabbed him, kneed him in the face, it doesn't work too well, especially when the rules didn't work. But that was the first taste. And then, of course, I think Don and Judy Quine with Mike Anderson out in LA for, I want to say it was September of '75, I want to say. It was the first PKA World Championships, and that would be the same championship, the same card that guys like Demetrius Havanas, God rest his soul, Bill Wallace, Joe Louis, all these guys would become the world champions, and that right down into the last fight for first and second in the light heavyweight division would be the very highly controversial fight between Jeff Smith and Wally Slokey.
Yes. I remember
a rematch a couple of years later. Again, gone the distance and a controversial decision. But look, the point being is we were lucky to be among giants in that era, and guys like Caesar, myself, Billy Pickles, Alex Atkinson, Ken Tallick, these guys from our era. We were kids basically. To have the opportunity to work with people like that opened up wonderful doors, not just for our ability to grow in leaps and bounds, but our ability to grasp the concept that it was okay to look outside your comfort zone to learn how to become better. And that was a wonderfully challenging but golden era that I haven't seen since, by the way. So anyway, and so during that era, a few of us got pretty tight. Alex Atkinson and I, we both came from the same school, and Kenny Hayashi, who would later go on to be, I think Kenny became the commissioner for kickboxing in all of
Yes.
Ontario, by the way.
Yeah.
And then Ron Yamanaka and Bob Dalglish and myself. So we would create a kind of a network, and we were all kind of, I would say, all different styles. You know, the funny part about us coming from Cheeto or Goju or Shorin or Shaolin, it was when we got in, when we fought, everybody was fighting the same way.
Yeah.
Smoke was a little different style when he fought, but I mean, it was kick ass in those days, blood and guts era, you know. So there wasn't the cosmetic appearance of this and this. It was just, you know, pumping people and foot sweep, taking them down, or kicks and stuff like
You're
that.
right.
I have a
I
great
remember
story.
looking at all this footage. It's
Oh yeah,
everybody. It was
Remarkable
brutal.
stuff.
It was brutal.
Yeah, but at the time, we didn't know it was brutal. It was just that's what we were doing, you know. That's what it was.
That's what it is.
And so anyway, we decided to form a little coalition, you know, a little group of guys who would come together so we could attract other people in for what you would call today cross training. And in those days we weren't using the word cross training. We were heavily influenced by guys like Lee and Lewis, and you know, Lewis in those days was wrapped up with the West brothers, you know, and they were called Tracy's Karate back in the.
Yes.
You know the story, yeah. And so this idea of working on the bags and two-person drills and contact and stuff like that, which was obsolete in traditional dojos, was a way of life for our genre, you know. And then from that group, you get to meet everybody who would come up to be, God, remarkable martial artists. Jean-Yves Dario, you know, the Iceman would come from Jean Tarien's group down. And I remember those guys coming up from Montreal. Now, I think Jean-Yves was I don't even think he was a black belt at the time, before he made the transition into kickboxing. But a lot of those guys I remember from coming up from Hull and Ottawa and Montreal, and you know, Daniel Richer and Pierre Myers and Luc Maisonneuve and all these guys that we knew. That was on. Oh, and so I'm jumping ahead. Let me just stop and Vic Arnold first, okay?
So Vic told me, and I think he showed me a certificate of Aki Kempo or Aki Jiu-Jitsu Association.
Aiki Kempo.
Aki Kempo, that
Aiki.
Aiki, yeah.
Aikido, Aiki.
Aiki Kempo. And I think Ron Yamanaka and yourself were part of this organization. And he told me that's how we met you, through that. So I'm sure there's more.
What I was going to say, what I was going to say before I jumped off on a horse there and went in 7 different directions is, in 1975, we had kind of come together and discuss this coalition and within what the heck we was going to do. And really it was Ron Yamanaka who kind of spearheaded the movement to bring us all together to say, look at us 5 guys. Actually, I still have a photograph. I think the first formal gathering we had was on the 9th of January, 1976, over in, God, I want to say Etobicoke or no, Renforth or somewhere over there. And it was the Kigami Biraki Japanese celebration.
Yes.
My God, and everybody came to that. We handed out certificates. I think that might have been the first time I met Vic. And then Vic came into Aiki Kempo. If it wasn't 76, it might have been 77. I can't remember for sure.
Yeah.
But in 77, and by that time I purchased a house in Etobicoke. I was in Etobicoke, and I don't know if you remember. Do you remember a chain of fitness centers called Vic Tanny's?
Vic Tanny's, that's right. Yeah.
Okay,
my dad used to train there. Yeah.
Okay, well there you go. So my partner at the time, she was the area supervisor for all of Vic Tanny's in Canada.
Yeah,
and
that was a big chain, man.
Yeah, it was a big, yeah. I mean, we had 27 clubs just in Southwestern Ontario alone, and then there's Quebec and out west and so on. And but actually, the guy who was in charge of training before a guy named Peter Kafik came in, and before, oh gosh, before there was a gentleman who came in to become one of the owners of Vic Danny's. I can't think of his name off the top of my head. But he had purchased Nautilus, by the way, and introduced the Nautilus going, oh gosh, I should really remember his name, but sadly. But anyway, the guy who was running Vic Danny's at the time as the chief floor instructor for all of that area was a guy named Howie Farrell. And Howie had been my student. I had become a partner in a club out on O'Connor Drive. You go down Eglinton, go down O'Connor up to Danforth, and we were at
East York.
1551 O'Connor Drive, just before you get down to the corner of St. Clair, which was another big dojo at the time, and then a Wing Chun club around the school, around the corner. It was the mecca of that era. And so Howie said, he said, if you ever want to leave where you are, he said, we would love to have you at Vic Danny's as you could be the instructor for all of the Vic Danny's. You could set up martial art programs. These were long before Billy Blanks ever came up with the idea for Taibo. We were doing martial art floor classes, is what we call them, to music as well, And anyway, that's I haven't said that for such a long time. So that was this era, and and I think Vic Danny's would later become known as Super Fitness.
Yes.
So I had purchased a house with Vicky and I. We purchased a house out in Etobicoke, not far from Wally Slokey, by the way, And I remember Wally had a couple of tournaments in 77, 78, I believe. And he held them at the Etobicoke Olympian. And I can remember in those days, guys like Jean Therrien and that group of people coming down from Quebec, fighters, my God. And, just this year in the Canadian Black Belt Hall of Fame, I noticed one of the guys I used to fight with quite regularly back in the day was a guy named Frank Di Lorenzo from Hamilton. And Frank just got inducted this year along with another friend of mine, Frank Clayton from Vancouver.
Very nice.
Another guy from Hamilton, though, originally, And so look, in that era and with that group, and the concept of it was okay to be Chito-ryu or Shotokan or whatever and come into our group to train, because the term Aiki refer to this harmonious flow, if you will, this ability not just in technique but in mentality and mindset. With it doesn't matter that you're from another school. In fact, we are so open and welcoming of that. Please come in. Kempo, whether it's N or M, it means the same thing. It's the pronunciation of the Chinese word Chuan Fa. Unless you're Cantonese, then it's Chun Fa. And because we were so, I guess, profoundly influenced by Bruce Lee and his iconic sentiment about removing yourself from the classical mess, and the classical mess being that indoctrinative, overly ritualized to the point of what was once functional is now dysfunctional. And the sad part about it was the people practicing it were so adamant that this was the way, they couldn't even see. In fact, not only could they not see the other side, even to look at it might represent something that would insult or be disgraceful to the status quo. So we kind of wanted nothing to do with that mentality, that closed door. We felt freedom outside our comfort zone, if I could say, if that was not a dichotomy. And so we came together. We created this thing called Aiki Kempo Karate Do. And Karate Do being what the Dai Nippon Butoku Kai was trying to create back in the 30s, when that movement of Okinawans ventured up onto the mainland. And of course, Funagoshi Gichin would of course be at the spearheading that movement, but he wasn't alone. Look, there were and there were people before that. I mean, there's not a lot of historical evidence, when you're trying to make a straight line backwards to find a chronology or a genealogical lineage. But I think there was a group of school kids from Naha who gave a demonstration at the Patoko Den in, I want to say 1908, I think, was the same year or a couple of years after it had been introduced to the school system in Okinawa. And then there was another gathering, maybe 1910. But the names escape us. It might have been Mateo Shinko's father. Funagoshi may or may not have been with him at that time. There's another occasion, maybe it could have been 1915, 1916, 1917. We just don't know, for sure. There's not any hard core evidence to pinpoint who it was, but we got guys like, Mateo Shinko of multiple Choki, 1921, Funagoshi Gichin. You got the Toyama Kanken, Weichi Kambun. Of course, in 1928, you got Miyagi Chojun and his dear friend Maburi Kenwa, founder of Shitoryu, who came up. He was a police officer. Came up in 1928. Then you got guys like Chitose Tsuyoshi. So there's a Gima Shinken, for example, who was a student who actually helped Funagoshi Gichin in 1922 presentation. But you got a handful of people, so it's almost impossible to say it was that one guy who created this. But the Batoko Den, or the Dainapan Batoko of that era, who had been headquartered at the Batoko Den in Kyoto, had created this mandate. And what a lot of karate people don't get, and I'm coming around the corner here to tell you about Aikikempo Jiu-Jitsu, Aikikempo Karate in a moment. But it helps. I remember this wonderful quote I learned from Dr. Stephen Fabian back in the day when I was with the Don Drager's newsletter list. And it was, he said something like, Budo, of which we know karate is an integral part, along with all the other spokes on the wheel of the hub of Budo, Kendo, Aikido, Judo, is an integral part of Budo. He said, Budo is it's a microcosm of the culture from which the tradition comes. And subsequently, by extension, the more you learn about the culture, so too do you learn more about the art, and vice versa.
Yes.
And so when the Batoko Den went after trying to help the Department of War and the Minister of Education formulate a plan to help support the war machine. This is during a period of radical military escalation. You got a German who was a physician. He was the professor of medicine at Tokyo University, but also the private physician for the Taisho Emperor at the time. Very sickly man. Didn't last. The father of Hirohito, by the way. And so, he says back in the Taisho period, he says, when all this nationalism had come to a head, and the Japanese had been dragged out from the dark ages of feudalism into becoming, within around 50 years, one of the most powerful nations on the planet. You remember the Tom Cruise movie, Last Samurai, and, a lot of foreigners being recruited to help with the military and music, sports, all that, commerce and education, everything. And so this idea introduced by a German to the hub of the Yamato nation, the Japanese nation, where he says, well, he said, keep in mind that the Japanese had taken Formosa. They've been involved with the Boxer Rebellion, 1900. They defeated Russia in 1904-1905. So I mean, their nationalistic pride was bubbling, So the Japanese, don't forget, at this as they're climbing the ladder for worldwide recognition, take over Formosa, become colonialism, take it over. They had been involved with the latter part of the Boxer Rebellion because the Manchu dynasty had fallen apart and foreigners were in there chopping up the pie, which led, of course, to a Boxer Rebellion 1900, and of which Japan was a party to that as well. And then, of course, in 1904, 1905 is the Russian conflict with Japan. So their nationalism and patriotic pride was over the hill. So at that time, the patriotism was riding high. Formosa, China, the incursions into China, the Manchu dynasty was falling apart. The foreign entities were chopping up China like a piece of pie. This would lead to the Boxers' Rebellion,
Yes.
which Japan was part of. And then, of course, just in 1904-05 was the Russian incursion. So by the time over a period of just more than 10 years, I mean, Japan had become this powerful nation, and yet it was struggling with this conscription basis in school and trying to prepare commoners. Remember, there was no more samurai in that day, so no more professional military, and so now it was the military were coming out from normal people, and trying to train them in boot camp wasn't proving successful. And so this German professor of medicine at Tokyo University and the private physician of the Taisho Emperor said, what we do in Germany is we long ago introduced wrestling and swordsmanship into the school system. And don't forget what Itosu Anko said in October of 1908 in his address to the Momosho Minister of Education, Department of War. He said, our victory, he was trying to introduce karate into the school system. He said, our victory today, this is the Duke of Wellington after the Battle of Waterloo, said, our victory today was gained on the playground of Eton. And so by the time the emperor is hearing this German highly respected intellect say, and in his mind, he's listening to wrestling and swordsmanship, he's saying, that's jujitsu and kenjutsu. But at that time, jujitsu was an antiquated practice. Kenjutsu was an antiquated practice. It had no place in modern warfare. But in order to achieve a greater outcome, the look back at the antiquated practice, while its technique may have been antiquated, the mindset that it created from the discipline would then be used as a template and a mechanism to focus on physical fitness and social conformity. So you had guys now coming out of the school system after a few years wrestling would become, that's reformed jujitsu at the hands of Kano Jigoro sensei, even though he'd only been training for 3.5, not even 4 years. And then after his teacher died, him and his friends tried to seek out another teacher or two, and that didn't work out well for them. So the idea of coming together to modify the practice into something that would benefit the nation caught on and made Kano a legend, basically. He's a father educator of Japan, and that's another story for another time. But the same thing happened with hundreds of schools of Kenjutsu, where a nucleus of researchers brought down to 4 simple strikes. Hit him in the head, stab him in the throat, cut his body in half, and defang the snake by hitting the wrist. So if you couldn't hold a sword, you're like the fangs of it. You weren't dangerous. And if I slapped you in the neck with a sword, you're gonna die. And so it became men, ski, do, and kote. And we wrapped it around with a bunch of yoroi over your body to protect yourself from getting the shit beaten out of you.
Yes.
Sorry, can I do that? And the next thing you know, Kendo was born. And so Kendo and Judo going into the school system. And then I think actually first it was the police department, Keisatsukan. Police department took it first. And then, of course, the school system. And then, of course, the military would adopt it. This would create the idea for Ito's uncle as well, who would jump on that bandwagon. Another story for another time. So the Dai Nippon Butokukai, as they're starting to watch this new fistic tradition without any weapons come to the mainland, of course, it was attracting a lot of attention, and especially with a lot of big wigs. And you had guys who were becoming the students of these guys, most notably Otsuka Hironori, founder of Wado-ryu. Originally, it's Wado-ryu Karate today, but originally it was a Wado-ryu Jiu-Jitsu Kempo is what it was, or Kempo Jiu-Jitsu. And he was born in 1891. He died in 1981. And his colleague was Konishi Yasuhiro, who was born a year later and died a year later, actually. So it was 92. Yeah, my apologies. 1 year ahead for both those guys. Anyway, they both lived to 90 years old. And I'm telling you this, if nobody else is, that these two guys who trained under Funagoshi Gichin, Multiple Choki, Maburi Kenwa, and so on, these guys would become the architects of what modern karate would be, especially Konishi, and anyway, these guys were also already Butokukai members, and so them saying, you're saying to the Oka guys, listen, guys, in order for you to be recognized here on the mainland, we're going to kind of have to play, but you can't, we can't be training in your underwear. That's what it's how you train here in this weather in Okinawa, and this concept of the do, the Tao, karate do, as opposed to karate jutsu, you focus on application as opposed to the cultural heritage that is born into the warrior class. Things like, the senpai kohai system, the belt system, all these things that would come from Kano Jigoro were made mandatory for the karate group to adopt. But the kata, which is a collection of solo representations against acts of physical violence that are habitual in human nature. I mean, look, for example, I was just this morning at the beach teaching my new student this kata tsukinaka. So the tsukinaka goes like this. There's a move in it that goes like this. It goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like this, right? And it's a white crane kata, by the way. And he was
looks like white crane.
He's a Weichi-Ryu guy, and he doesn't, they're powerful as any you can imagine. But they just, they come from this mindset where, if it's not my way, it's the highway type of thing. Oh, that's not my style, and oh gosh, we can't think outside that, because anything outside it is, well, that's very interesting. No, it's not correct, right? Or that's a different way.
Yeah.
So I said, look, if you think about the acts of physical violence that are habitual in human nature, and I say to you, how do you deal with that? In the 1970s, 80s, 90s was we don't do that, or my, you're not allowed to do that, or the referee would start. So, but anyway, so here's the thing: the guy grabs you like this, and you who's stupid enough to do that? I'll tell you who's stupid enough to do it is a bully and somebody who's totally confident, who's done it so many times with people in the past, it's become habitual for them. So they're like, hey, and you're like, oh, he gets really afraid. If you're lucky enough to headbutt him in the face on the way in, he can't get in. I spit in face, so I get that flick. Now, I don't, conjure up a big greenie. I don't need it. I just a quick. I get the previous response, a flinch response, and then a little finger flick in the cajones, and he bends forward, and I slap those ears, or I, this is called
yes,
gojisho. You see this, right? So that's really that's a gouge in the eye. And as I turn the head, because I spin head the other way and bicep bump him, and as I bicep bump him, I fucking wrap him around from behind. And I bring that, so I spin him around, so his back's to me now. And then I bring my hand up. Now, this movement here used to be exclusive to Milano and, okay, you missed the joke, right? Okay, that's an Italian joke. Hey. So I bring it up.
I get it. Yeah. I went to...
The kata wasn't meant to teach you anything. It was meant to culminate the individual lessons you had already learned in two-person practices
Reminder
on this escalating stairway of
so like a reminder. Yeah.
I remember that quite a bit, by the way.
Well, I'm going to jump in. Bam! Right here.
Oh my goodness. Oh.
Do you remember this?
Who's that young, handsome guy with hair?
Who's this guy?
Hey, you know something? You know something about that magazine?
1984, 40 years ago, I was 15. I picked it up at, I'm going to take you now. You took me to a memory lane. I'm going to take you to memory lane.
Okay.
So I was 15 years old. There was an instructor. He goes by Sunny Tang. He's a Wing Chun guy, but his Chinese name is Dunhua, Sifu Dunhua. He runs a big school here in Toronto, Sunny Tang Kung Fu School. Are you familiar with the gentleman?
No, but I learned Silam Tao Cham Kyu Bil Ji, the Lok Dim Bun Guan, Wu
Yes.
and about 50 or 60 ways to hit the wooden dummy back in the day from Frankie Sito, who was a Wing Chun instructor down in the Niagara region back in the day.
Frank Sito. Yeah. I've heard of that name too.
Yeah.
But he had a martial arts school with a martial arts store, actually, and a martial arts school behind it in Scarborough. Yeah.
That's 40 years ago. My goodness, that is
40 years ago.
I remember that cover very well. We shot it at Burbank at Black Belt Magazine's office with Mario Prada. Mario Prada was the photographer there, who I just bumped into Mario in Los Angeles some years ago. And by the way, the guy that I'm shooting at with us.
Yeah. Remember this?
Oh, I know.
So, okay, let's talk about books. Okay, so the Bible, there's too many to list. You've got the Bible of Karate, the Bubishi, the Tales of Okinawan's Great Masters, Ancient Okinawan Martial Arts, Karate, My Art. Okay, so what was your driving motivational force to write all of these things? Like, was it an inspirational event that sparked you? Like, what was it that caused you to just keep churning these out? Yeah.
October 1977. I was looking for to better understand tradition because I wasn't happy where I was. The tournament world, the egos, the commercialism, the nepotism. I was beginning to get to the point in my career where I was able to penetrate the so-called abyss, and what I was seeing was a side of the industry that wasn't inspirational. And Wally Slokey said to me, he said, "Hey, Warner's gonna host Richard Kim." Don Warner, a businessman from Hamilton, was going to be hosting Richard Kim from the Zenbei Butoku Kai in Hamilton that following month. This was September, that was going to be October. And that if I wanted to get a taste of something really, super traditional, he would be the guy that I should go and see. Long story short, I went. I'd won at that time. I'd already been at least a one-time North American champion. I wouldn't win the second one until '78, the following year. I won, all kinds of stuff, and and I was the first guy to tell you how good I was, and yeah, and I went to that seminar, and it was like a week-long thing, and I stayed with Warner at his place, and and I was just like, and I was just like overwhelmed. I'd never heard anybody speak about karate, its history, philosophy, holistic, pedagogical, scientific, mechanical principles in a way that this guy did. And I was literally lost for words. And then one night at our lecture, and there was some massive 50, 60 people sitting in for the lecture. Again, I'd never been to a seminar where there was a lecture,
Right.
And he came out, he had a little bow tie on, and he was talking and with words. I couldn't even, I mean, I had a high school dropout, I had no idea what his words were even meaning, pedagogical, and then he said, in the front row, Pat McCarthy, Pat, everybody, I'd like to get an opportunity to meet one of Canada's great young karate champions. Remarkable young. Patrick, please stand up. I stood up. I look on you. Yeah. Thanks. That's me. Keep talking. And he said, Pat, just before we go on, because tonight we're going to talk about modern karate, would you tell everybody who Itosu Anko was? Just a little bit about who he trained with and what his mindset was with regards to the evolution of the modern art. And I went, ooh. So he started off intimidating me, and that's where it started. And I was like so embarrassed. I went, oh my God,
Yeah.
And so I was going from, yeah, thank you, to, oh my God, I better shut the fuck up, I went, right? And that's where he started. And he taught me that first session a Japanese proverb that in Japanese is onko chi shin. And onko chi shin in a nutshell means something like, if you study the old, you will be able to understand the new. In other words,
told me this at your seminar.
Oh, it's become.
Yeah.
I should have it tattooed on my back. And this one I just did here on Kancho Toku after discovering.
I saw that on Amazon. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and just 1 week ago, I just finished Kampenshu, which is a complete revision. Now that I know how to use ChatGPT 4.0 and DALL-E, how to enhance photographs, make them color, and that. I've redone a lot. I'm redoing a bunch of books. But anyway, so
first of all, not enough words to say thank you. I really appreciate your time. Before we end, I'd like you to close with something for the audience, something meaningful, something for the future, something to ponder.
Liking what brings us together, that conditions our body, cultivates the mind, and nurtures the spirit. It depends how far down that path you get before it should become evident that the destination isn't the goal. It's the journey.
Yes.
And so I hope that whatever journey you are on, you take the time to embrace it, because it's not the possession, it's the pursuit. It's not the finish line, it's the race. And it's a marathon, man. Take your time, enjoy it. So even if you never achieve the goal, let the beauty of the effort be the love that brings us together, because whatever separates us is not anywhere near as important as what brings us all together.
Oh, I love that.
Beautiful thing.
Yeah.
I want to share it.